"I would choose death before belonging to you," the Apache woman said. At dawn, when the cowboy sliced through her chains, the desert unfolded endlessly, vast, brutal, and unforgiving. Miles of scorched earth swallowed every sound, except the restless wind, weaving through the canyon walls. The cowboy rode alone, burdened by a past too heavy to forget and a future too empty to chase. His horse moved steadily, hooves striking the ground in a tired rhythm that echoed his own heart. Slow, worn but still beating. He had witnessed enough bloodshed to know. Peace was nothing more than a lie men told themselves to sleep at night. Yet he rode on, driven by something he couldn't name. The sun had barely crested the horizon when he came upon the charred remains of a camp. Smoke still clung to the air, and the sand lay dark with ash and memory. He dismounted cautiously, eyes scanning every shadow. That's when he saw her, chained to a wooden post, half hidden in the morning shade. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where iron had bitten into flesh. She was young, long black hair tangled with dust and smoke. Faint tribal markings traced her face. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were not the eyes of a victim. They burned with pride, fury, and something far more dangerous, unbroken dignity. The cowboy stood still, watching her chest rise and fall, calm and measured, as if she had already made peace with death. Whoever left her there had assumed she would never be found. He approached quietly, boots crunching against gravel. She didn't flinch. When he knelt before her, he found no fear in her gaze, only defiance. Without a word, he drew his knife and cut the chain binding her to the post. The metal fell with a dull clang. She didn't thank him. She didn't even move. He gestured toward his horse and held out a water flask. She stared at him, lips cracked, eyes accusing. Finally, she took it, drank sparingly, and turned away. Pride resisted, but thirst won. They traveled in silence as the day burned hotter. He spoke little. Words had never been his strength. Still, he knew he couldn't abandon her to the land. That night, he made a fire and offered food. She ate without meeting his eyes. Hands trembling with exhaustion, gaze fixed on the dark horizon. She was waiting for someone, but he knew no one was coming. Days passed. Her silence began to make sense. It wasn't arrogance. It was grief. Her people were gone. Her heart lay buried in that burned camp. Yet her spirit still stood. On the third day, they reached an abandoned outpost overlooking a canyon. He stopped the horse. "You can stay here," he said quietly. She didn't respond. The cuffs still clung to her wrists like a curse. He stepped closer, her body tensed, ready to strike. "Easy," he murmured, carefully twisting the metal lock. It snapped open. The sound echoed louder than thunder. She stared at her freed wrists. For a fleeting moment, gratitude flickered, then vanished. She straightened and finally spoke, voice trembling but fierce. "I would rather die than be yours." The words struck him harder than lead. He froze, chain dangling from his hand. He wanted to say he never meant to own her, only to right a wrong, but the words stayed buried. She turned away, pride blazing brighter than the sun. In that moment he understood. She wasn't just free from chains. She was freedom. He let her walk. That night, she sat awake by the fire, rubbing her wrists, eyes reflecting flame. He wanted to tell her she was safe, but safety was never what she wanted. At dawn, she glanced at him once, just once. By the next sunrise, he followed her from afar. When she collapsed near a dry riverbed, he lifted her gently, gave her water. This time her eyes held only exhaustion. Her name was Nayeli. Weeks passed. They rode together. Two survivors. Two broken souls learning silence, until gunfire shattered the evening. Bounty hunters. They fought side by side like fate itself had bound them. He took bullets meant for her. When the last man fell, he smiled weakly. "Guess I'm yours now." "No," she whispered through tears. "You are free. So are you." He died with the sunrise. She buried him with the broken chain beside his grave. Not as bondage, but redemption. She walked into the horizon, free because she had never bowed, and the wind carried her song. Years passed, but the desert remembered. Nayeli walked through lands that whispered her name in the wind. She became a shadow at the edge of campfires, a story traded in hushed voices. The Apache woman who walked alone, the woman who survived chains, fire, and loss. She never forgot the cowboy, not as a savior, but as a man who chose to break himself so another soul could remain whole. She returned to her people, scattered but alive. She helped rebuild. She taught children not fear, but strength. She taught them that freedom begins inside the heart, not in the hands of another. Men tried to claim her. She refused. Enemies tried to break her. They failed. When settlers spoke of the desert ghost who defended the weak and vanished before dawn, they spoke of her. When elders told stories of dignity that could not be stolen, they spoke of her. And when Nayeli finally stood once more at the canyon where the cowboy lay buried, she sang again, this time not of pain, but of victory. She was no one's possession. She was no one's shadow. She was the proof that even in a broken world, the soul can remain undefeated. The desert does not forget, even when years pass and footsteps fade. Long after the cowboy's grave had settled into the earth and the wind had softened the sharp edges of stone and memory, the land still carried the weight of what had been lost and what had been chosen. The canyon still knew the sound of gunfire and silence. The sand still remembered blood, tears, and the quiet resolve of a woman who refused to bow. Nayeli returned there once, only once, when time had already carved strength into her bones. She stood before the grave as the sun leaned low, her shadow stretching across the ground like a bridge between past and present. The broken chain still lay there, rusted and half-buried, no longer a symbol of pain, but of something conquered. She knelt and pressed her palm into the earth, feeling its warmth, its endurance. She did not cry. Her tears had been spent long ago in places where no one watched. She spoke softly, not to the man beneath the soil, but to the world itself, saying she had kept walking, that she had not let cruelty make her small, that she had carried freedom forward the only way she knew how, by living it. The wind answered her, lifting her hair, brushing her cheek like a familiar presence. And when she rose and walked away, she did not look back again. Life carried her onward through seasons that blurred together like footprints erased by sandstorms. She moved through lands scarred by loss, through camps where hope had thinned to a fragile thread, through villages rebuilt from ash and stubborn will. Stories followed her whether she wanted them or not. Some called her a spirit, others a ghost, others a warrior. She accepted none of those names. She was simply a woman who listened when others looked away. She shared what she knew, how to find water where the earth looked dead, how to read the sky before it turned cruel, how to stand still inside yourself when fear tried to bend your spine. She taught children that chains are not always iron, that sometimes they are words spoken often enough to sound like truth, and that breaking them begins in the mind. She helped widows learn to breathe again, taught the wounded that survival was not shameful, and reminded the broken that dignity could be carried even when everything else was stripped away. She never stayed long. Attachment was a luxury she no longer needed. At night, she sometimes sat alone beneath the stars, humming the song of her people, the same song she had once sung by a dying fire while a wounded man bled beside her. The song changed as she changed. It still carried grief, but it also carried gratitude, endurance, and a quiet acceptance of what could never be returned. When she dreamed, she sometimes saw the cowboy's face, not as he was when he died, but as he might have been before the world hardened him. She did not wake with pain anymore, only with understanding. One evening, many years later, she stopped near a small settlement, built from scraps of different lives stitched together. It was a place for those who no longer fit anywhere else. They welcomed her without questions. She sat with them by the fire, its warmth flickering across faces lined with worry and resilience. Someone asked where she came from, and she said from the road. Someone asked where she was going, and she said she would know when she arrived. A young girl sat close, staring at the faded scars on Nayeli's wrists with open curiosity. She asked if it hurt. Nayeli thought of iron biting into flesh, of thirst, and heat and hatred, and then of the moment the chain fell away. She said yes, it hurt, but pain did not decide her ending. The girl nodded slowly, as if that answer settled something deep inside her. That night, Nayeli sang, and the fire crackled softly as if listening. Some people cried without knowing why. Others slept without fear for the first time in years. By morning, Nayeli was gone, leaving behind nothing but warm ashes and a feeling that something important had passed through. Time continued its quiet work. Her steps eventually slowed, not from weakness, but from a growing sense of completion. One day, she climbed a ridge overlooking a vast stretch of desert glowing under the sun. The land looked endless, just as it had when her journey began. But she was no longer the woman who had once been chained within it. She sat on a warm rock and let the silence settle around her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to remember everything without armor. The fire, the screams, the quiet man who cut her chains and never asked for gratitude. The words she had spoken to protect her soul. She did not regret them. They had been her truth, and truth had carried her this far. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, filling her lungs with dust and heat and freedom. When she stood again, her body felt light, as if the weight she had carried for so long had finally been set down. She walked forward one step at a time, until her footprints disappeared into the sand. No one knows exactly how her story ended. Some say she died beneath the open sky, content and unafraid. Others say she became part of the desert itself, her spirit woven into wind and stone. Among those who truly understood, there was another belief, that a soul that refuses to bow does not end. It continues. They say that when the wind moves just right through the canyon, a song can still be heard soft and steady, carrying the memory of a woman who chose herself when the world tried to claim her. And in that song lives a simple truth, meant for anyone willing to listen. Freedom is not something given, and it is not something taken from another's hands. It is something you decide, even when it costs you everything. This story is not just about the past. It is about you, about every soul who refused to bow, every heart that chose dignity over comfort, every person who said, "I will not belong to pain." Freedom is not given. It is claimed. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk forward without looking back.